Diana, quick welcome.
Thank you.
It's your second year as director of the Aldeburgh Doc Fest.
Yeah.
And how was last year?
Last year was great. It was a steep learning curve. I'd never done it before. I thought I just had to, find some good documentaries and write out a programme and people would turn up. But it's not that straightforward, of course. But there was a very positive response to what we gave them last year. And I've learnt a lot from that. And I've watched a lot more films in the intervening year and also made the programme much bigger. So we're running two festivals side by side. We're running the main house in Aldeburgh and then we're running a fringe series of events in Walberswick, which is up the road.
What's the difference between the insight that a documentary gives you on somebody's life than what you can achieve in a fiction film?
Well, I suppose the thing about a documentary is ultimately that it's true. And often things that are true are more extraordinary than the most wild flights of fancy of someone's imagination. And I think they become more and more relevant actually as we have a greater sense of the world being one place. When I was a child, China was a very, very long way away and exotic, and one never heard about it. And things that happened on the other side of the world didn't get reported. Now, we're all conscious of what's happening within hours, pretty much, of it occurring. But the world is still hugely various and full of contradictions and full of scandals and horrors as well. Of course, I do have to take into consideration the fact that Aldeburgh already has a very strong tradition of music. It's got a lot of retired folk who are interested, who have particular interests, and so one has to some extent, tailor it for them. But I've tried to make it as broad-based as I can, and I hope there'll be lots of laughs as well in the course of it.
It must be a strange move, this, from being such a well-known actor and then sort of going backstage. Do you find it confounds people's expectations? Have you found any unexpected sort of wrinkles in that change?
I know that somebody who was my agent for a long time used to say to me, you really have to decide what you want to play because people don't know how to cast you. And I said to him, well, I think that's part of the point, isn't it? That's why, for me, that was always part of the appeal of acting, is that one has the opportunity to inhabit somebody else's mindset and experience. And I think that from my point of view, just to go a little bit away from your question, from my point of view, what's always interesting is a kind of forensic interest in what makes people do what they do, and see the action and the reaction and the reaction and the reaction. And one's job as an actor really is to go back from the clues which you have on the page, which is the dialogue, and try and figure out why that person does that at that point. And I don't really see that documentary is very different from that. You're still trying to understand why things turn out the way they do.
You're in the film of Edward St Aubyn's book Mother's Milk,
Yes.
which was Booker shortlisted.
It was enormous fun to do, and actually was made by a documentarian, Jerry Fox, who has spent much of the last 20 years making very good art films for Melvyn Bragg on the South Bank show, and he loved Mother's Milk, and it was his idea to film it, and so he put it together. Edward St Aubyn did the script, and they raised the money, and he filmed it with his documentary crew, which was an experience. I don't think Jerry would mind me saying, but I think he hadn't quite estimated that making a fiction film is a much more elaborate process than making a documentary, because of course with a documentary crew they have to be extremely skilled and very adept at catching things as they happen, so they move around with the camera and get the footage, and then it's edited together to tell the story. And I think Jerry thought that he would film Mother's Milk that way. He was very quickly disabused of that by Jack Davenport, who was playing Patrick. In fact, one of the most impressive filmmakers I've ever watched working was John Huston. I didn't actually work with him, but my then boyfriend was filming with him, and he was very impressive when he was making the film of Annie, which was a huge musical. He had storyboarded everything, and he only shot what he needed. and as soon as he got it, he'd move on. You know, and it was a multi-million-dollar project. And talking to him about it, it was because his career started in the wartime. He was doing reportage. There was very little footage, very little film stock available. He was using bin ends. And so he had to actually plan absolutely everything he did before he filmed it. And I think it's a very good lesson to learn.
It must be an enormous responsibility. It must be rather it must be like planning some extraordinary party, but much more sort of.
It's exactly like planning a party, actually. But I love planning parties. I love giving parties, and I'm a fairly fearless party giver. I mean, I'm a fairly fearless cook, for instance. There'd be something very exotic coming from maybe a touch of Borch. We've got a Russian coming to talk about the making of documentaries, and we invited a Russian last year, and I think that's a good thing to be doing because they work in a different way, in a different tradition. So let's say we're having borscht and homegrown cream to floating in it, and then we're going to have let's see, we're going to have something very, very delicious for pudding, confected, light, that melts in your mouth. And sends you home happily to sleep.